Tonight on Newshour, history is made in Tokyo. Sanae Takaichi has been elected leader of Japan's Liberal Democratic Party, clearing her path to become the nation's first female prime minister. Now, she's already been likened to Margaret Thatcher for her steely resolve, her unapologetically conservative instincts, and her belief in strong national defence. But the comparisons only go so far. Unlike Thatcher, she favours state-driven investment rather than free market deregulation. She backs expansive fiscal spending instead of budgetary austerity. And she rises from factional consensus rather than single-minded conviction politics. Still, the symbolism is powerful. A woman breaking Japan's highest glass ceiling while invoking the memory of one who once reshaped Britain. Well, her election ends weeks of internal turmoil after Fumio Kishida's resignation. Markets have already responded, the yen softening as investors expect stimulus to continue, yet questions linger. Can Takaichi unify her party, restore voter confidence and balance her hawkish diplomacy with economic pragmatism? We'll have the latest from our correspondent in Tokyo, followed by expert analysis on what this new era might mean for Japan's politics, economy, and regional strategy. Let's begin though with our report from Tokyo on the decision, the agenda ahead, and the questions Sanae Takaichi's leadership now raises.
Japan's ruling party on Saturday picked hardline conservative Sanae Takaichi as its leader. And with that, Takaichi is on course to become the country's first female prime minister, in a move set to jolt investors. She's a former economic security and internal affairs minister with an expansionary fiscal agenda. And compared to her main competitor, she offered a starker vision for change.
Rather than being happy, I feel like the tough work starts here. All of us together have a ton of work to do. We have a lot of policies to execute speedily.
The Liberal Democratic Party elected Takaichi to regain trust from a public angered by rising prices and drawn to opposition groups promising stimulus and clampdowns on migrants. Here's Tina Barrett, professor of political science at Tokyo's Sophia University.
So I think the election of Takaichi probably reflects a shift towards the right, a more sort of nationalist type of politics in Japan, which has been going on really, I think, probably since the 1990s. So it's not a new trend. But in the past couple of years, the people who've been elected the leaders of the LDP generally come from the more liberal wing of the party. So I think this is significant within the party's politics to say that the right to recapture the leadership, which they haven't really held, I think, really since Prime Minister Abe. She wants to see more fiscal stimulus, more spending as a way of trying to kickstart the economy.
Takaichi told a press conference on Saturday, quote, "Right now, I believe Japan's economy is in a very fragile state." She also said she planned to honor an investment deal with U.S. President Donald Trump that lowered his punishing tariffs in return for Japanese taxpayer-backed investments, having previously suggested redoing it. Some of her supporters viewed her win on Saturday as a watershed in Japan's male-dominated politics. A vote in Parliament to choose a replacement for the outgoing prime minister is expected on October 15th. Takaichi is favored, as the ruling coalition has the largest number of seats.
Okay, now let's cross over to our correspondent Rebecca Bullen in the region for more on the recent developments. Rebecca, good to see you. Is it a moment of change in Japan, do you think? A new leader emerging after weeks of political uncertainty. From within the Liberal Democratic Party to the wider public, how are people responding, do you think, to Sanae Takaichi's election? And what immediate challenges does she face as she prepares to form this first government?
Well, Guy, reactions have been somewhat mixed to Sanae Takaichi being voted in as Japan's new LDP leader. She is a veteran lawmaker and she's a very well-known figure in Japanese politics, but she's also controversial. Although many see it as a positive that it looks like Japan is set to get its first female prime minister, it has to be remembered that she is a hardline conservative, and Takaichi is also known for having quite traditional views when it comes to gender roles. So it's not really clear whether she will be doing much for women's rights as such in this role, assuming that she does become Prime Minister. And she's coming into the LDP at a very difficult time for the party, and it is going to be something of an uphill battle to win over voters' trust. Political analysts are undecided about how popular she would be among the masses. And as well as the party, it's also the economy that is struggling at the moment. People are dealing with very, very high inflation levels, and Takaichi will also have to manage US-Japan relations too, and try to see through a trade deal that was agreed under the previous administration. Now, the LDP is a party that's been in power for, or has largely dominated Japanese politics for several decades, but it is a party that is in crisis. It's been hit by a number of scandals, and Takaichi will now have this challenge of trying to bring unity to the party and try and strengthen the party in these very, very difficult circumstances. Now, the party has also suffered these election defeats recently, and that's really the main reason why we saw the previous Prime Minister, Shigeru Ishiba, stepping down, announcing his resignation last month. Now, the next step of the process is that there will be a parliamentary vote to actually decide on the next Prime Minister, and it's not a done deal that this will be Takaichi. This will be something that will be carried out, is expected next week in Parliament. And although it isn't a done deal, the consensus is that Takaichi does look set to become Japan's first female prime minister, because the ruling coalition does have the largest number of seats. And in that case, she would be set, of course, to make history in the country.
Well, to break this down further, I'm delighted to say I'm joined now by Sujiro Takashita, a professor of management at the University of Shizuoka in Shizuoka City. Professor, thank you so much for joining us. It's good to see you again on the show. First female prime minister to be. How significant is this moment for Japan, both politically and socially?
Well, I think it's very sense that if you look at the stock market, it's just jumped up 4.8% today, which is a sharp contrast to when Ishiba-san became the prime minister. The market went down by 4.8%. And many were expecting, a lot of revitalization in areas like defense, as you reported. But it's an expectation of change in Japan. I mean, Takaichi-san is a lot more, I say, a woman with wings and strength, rather than wishy-washy, boneless, spineless politician that we've seen in the past. So, from that perspective, at least she clarifies what is black, what is white, and from that point of view, I think the direction Japan is going is at least can be seen on the miles coming forward.
Now, someone else that history recorded as certainly not being wishy-washy was Margaret Thatcher. Comparisons have been drawn between Sanae Takaichi and Margaret Thatcher, even by Takaichi herself. What lies behind, do you think, that parallel, and how reasonable is that comparison?
Well, it's the will to basically change, especially in a situation where Japan, and particularly LDP, is in very much of a troubled state. Basically going for expansion of fiscal policy, which many might feel in danger. But, there is a lot of very good logical consistency in what she's saying, because we saw the mistakes that were made in Europe I mean, basically, you have to go for growth in order to reduce the amount of debt rather than the other way around. So it's making things very clear. And again, also from the uh, solidity of within the LDP, so also already announced some of the very major members who were the opposition, particularly in the race of being the leader of LDP. So I think she's trying to also rectify the unification within the LDP as well, which is very important, obviously, in order to, continue to see the progress, considering the fact that, both in upper and lower house, LDP do not have the majority, meaning that they really would need a lot of cooperation, depending on the policy, with many of the opposition parties.
Yeah, well, we know there are differences, and we spoke about it at the top of the show in terms of sort of fiscal strategies and ideas about public investment. But certainly there does seem to be something, doesn't there, in terms of a shared ideology, this sense of personal responsibility and being unafraid to simplify things, clarify differences, for example.
Absolutely. I think that is spot on. I mean, of course, times are different. The situation, country, everything is so different. But what's really the core, I should say, pillar of the philosophy into business or economics or politics, I think these two ladies have a lot in common. And I think it's the will or to trying to change or alter the situation. And I think that's one of the reasons why the market has taken it so positively today, with a high expectation that there will be a turnaround in Japanese economy as well.
Let's talk a bit about the potential impact of that said ideology then. How do you think that her leadership might reshape Japan's economic direction in the months ahead?
Well, firstly, Japan is already very strong in means of, I should say, process innovation. In other words, making a lot of goods. And basically, we're not really losing out competitiveness in that area, but we're rather losing out in product innovation side. We need more of the jabbing the arm type of ideology that kicks into, the business arena. The corporations are too scared to make investment. Internal, I would say, the funds by the Japanese corporation have reached the same level as the Italian economy. So basically, what we really need to see is corporations making a move, feeling safe, or at least challenged to make a move towards these investments, which would basically revitalize the cycle of the economy within Japan.
And how are Japan's allies, how are the countries, particularly across the region, how are they interpreting this victory?
Well, Taiwan is very happy, but I don't think China is very happy at all. But let's face it, I don't think Takaichi-san is a right wing like many people say. The fact of the matter is, Japan had been, as I told you, very wishy-washy in their foreign policies. So I think she's just trying to alter things back into the middle of the road kind of policy, because our foreign policy had not really been beneficial to the Japanese public and its people. And that's one of the reasons why, Saito, for example, the opposition has increased, voicing out the frustration of the public. So, I think what she's trying to do, and many people talk about, right-wing situation in Japan, that is a rather misleading, I would say, concept, because it's nothing like in Europe, basically. So, yeah, I'd say that, many of the countries would be alarmed, or they will claim that they're alarmed that Takaichi-san has become Prime Minister of Japan. But, as far as free nations are concerned, free world coalition is concerned, there's nothing to worry about but to cheer that at least she is now the Prime Minister.
And Professor, one of the things that I remember we spoke about when you were last on the program were the divisions, the factions within the LDP itself. I mean, it's great to be forthright, strong, clear about what you believe is right and wrong. But how effective do you think she will be at unifying this often divided party?
She's doing already a much better job than Ishiba-san, I think. I think what Ishiba-san did was basically to separate and dissect, within the LDP. I don't know. It was a retaliation towards the Abe faction. I don't know. But the fact of the matter is that Takaichi-san already is announcing, to make sure that a lot of strong members of different faction members will be on very major, faces of the LDP. So rather than ousting them, she's basically inviting them to basically join in. So I can see that she's trying to rectify, to solidify, LDP more, especially considering the fact that, LDP itself is very much in grave danger, to say the least.
And what do we understand of her policy, her strategy when it comes to defense and her sort of broader foreign policy? Are the key aspects emerging yet?
And many of the, I should say, foreign press talks about the fact that, she's ultra right wing, blah, blah, blah. But, that's again wrong, because what she's trying to do is rectify or introduce a norm. For example, creating Department of National Intelligence, which is basically placed in virtually every country. But in Japan, we have a very, very lax law, which makes it heaven for spies, for example, to operate. And all she's saying is, hey, let's become a normalized state like any other nations to protect ourselves, especially with the hegemony war between the United States and China. And we're obviously getting quite a strong aggression from China. And U.S. is totally, basically throwing itself out of being a leader in that sense. So, basically what she's trying to do is rectify the situation to a normalized state. But, for many, where they saw a previous Japan, as we just talked about, being wishy-washy, she's just trying to rectify into normalized state. But I think from that point of view, yes, many people might think that she's a rather right-wing. In my opinion, she's just trying to bring back the norm.
Trying to bring back the norm. And you mentioned the markets and the sense that, obviously it's very early, but there has been a response from the markets. Do you think some of that is to do with this clarity we've spoken about, with this frankness? I mean, she's spoken about crisis management spending, being very clear and unafraid to talk about the seriousness of the problem in front of her. Do you think that has reassured the markets?
Yes, very much so. I mean, again, she's very clear about expansion of fiscal policy. She's not afraid to say that we may increase the debt, which is, for many of the politicians have been too scared. Again, if you look at the mistakes made by the EU, it's pretty clear that what we really need to see is growth in order to reduce our debt, not the other way around. The direction of causality, I think, had been misunderstood for so many years, and I think she's not afraid to say that we are going for growth first, and then we can basically try to rectify other problems, which I think is a very correct methodology of growth going further in Japan.
Let's just go back to China for a minute. I mean, obviously it's a very delicate situation. Are you expecting a firmer line when it comes to China? If so, how do you think that will manifest?
Well, again, what I feel is that Takaichi-san is trying to bring a normalized state as a nation as far as defense issues or intelligence issues are concerned in Japan, which have been too lax and just off the cuff. So from that point of view, I don't think she's becoming a right wing. She fully understands that our political situation may be quite cold, but our economy is still very hot. And we also know that China is trying to basically increase their positioning as a leader on many of the coalition movements, especially now that U.S. is shooting their own foot from that kind of leadership. So, from that perspective, I think she would continuously, obviously, try to sustain good economic relationship and partnership with China. But the political issues, particularly the intelligence issues, national security issues, that is a different story, and I think she has a very good, strong stance against China on that.
And finally, Professor, we live in a world, don't we, where there's so much media noise, so much noise in the world of diplomacy even, that it can be very hard to land key messages at times. What do you expect her to bring in terms of brand Japan? Are you expecting her to project a new set of values, of statements about the country on the world stage?
I think one of the things that she was saying was that she wants to say Japan is back. Now, yes and no, in the sense that, Japan does not have the potential growth as it did, during the 80s or 90s. Obviously, it's a totally different, structure of economy. And considering our demographics, that's not the case. But that said, it's quite nice to basically feel that she's at least trying to bring in a new concept, new ideology, which we can look forward to, because we didn't really have that kind of leader that could show, or at least infer that there is a very good milestone ahead of us, or at least we should. So from that perspective, yes, I think she's putting a very good jab in the arm of the economy as a whole.
A good jab in the arm. Professor, we always love hearing your analysis on NewsHour. Thank you again for joining us on the show.
Thank you.
As Japan ushers in a new political chapter then, the world watches to see how Sanae Takaichi will balance continuity with change. Her leadership may bring fresh direction on defence, diplomacy and economic revival, but also fresh tests of unity at home and trust abroad. What she decides in the coming weeks could redefine Japan's place in the region for years to come. Well, that is all for this edition of NewsHour. From all of us here at A News, thanks for being with us.